There's a certain kind of beauty in a pile of scrap wood. Most people walk right past it. They see a jumble of mismatched pieces, forgotten cutoffs, and discarded remnants from bigger, more important projects. It looks like firewood, or maybe just trash waiting for a trip to the dump. I, however, see a pile of possibilities. Tucked away in the corner of a local lumberyard was just such a pile, marked with a humble sign that read, "Scrap Bin, $5. It was a motley crew of hardwoods, a sliver of walnut, a chunk of maple, a few odd-shaped pieces of cherry. To the untrained eye, it was worthless. But to a woodworker, it was a $5 ticket to a creative lottery. The allure of the scrap bin is the challenge it presents. It's an invitation to create something from nothing, to find value where others see waste. These weren't pristine, dimensioned boards ready for a grand dining table. They were awkward, stubborn, and full of character. And flaws. Each piece told a story of what it almost was. This one was too short. That one had a knot in the wrong place. My task, should I choose to accept it for the price of a fancy cup of coffee, was to give them a new story, a better ending. I paid my $5, loaded the awkward collection into my truck, and felt that familiar spark of a new project beginning. Back in the shop, I spread the pieces out on my workbench like a puzzle with no picture on the box. The collection was even more random than I first thought. There was no single piece long enough or wide enough for a conventional design. This is where many people would give up. They would try to force a preconceived idea onto the materials, find that it's impossible, and toss the wood into the stove. But that's not the way of the wood shop. The real work doesn't begin with a perfect plan. It begins with a deep respect for the material you have in front of you, no matter how humble it may seem. This pile of wood was a lesson in humility waiting to happen. It was a reminder that nature rarely gives us perfect straight lines. It gives us knots, burls, and unpredictable grain. The challenge wasn't to conquer the wood and bend it to my will. The challenge was to listen to what the wood wanted to become. It required a different kind of thinking, a more fluid and adaptive approach. My job was to act as a steward, to guide these forgotten scraps toward a new purpose, to transform them from a $5 pile of junk into something someone would cherish. The journey was just beginning. With a regular project, you start with a blueprint. You have your dimensions, your cut list, your grand vision all mapped out. You go to the lumberyard and buy the specific boards you need to bring that vision to life. But with a pile of scraps, that process is turned completely on its head. You can't start with the design. You have to start with the wood. I spent a good hour just moving the pieces around, arranging them in different combinations. I wasn't looking for a specific object yet. I was just looking for relationships between the pieces. Which colors complemented each other, which grain patterns could flow together. My design wasn't born from a sketchpad but from the raw materials themselves. The longest piece of walnut was just over a foot long. The widest piece of maple was only a few inches across. These limitations weren't obstacles, they were the rules of the game. Slowly, an idea began to form. A small decorative box. A set of coasters? No. The pieces seemed to want to be joined together, to create a larger, unified surface. The contrasting colors of the dark walnut, the creamy maple, and the reddish cherry called for a striped pattern. I decided to make a high-end cutting board, or perhaps a serving platter, where the beauty would come from the artful combination of these disparate woods. The plan became simple. I would mill each piece down to a uniform thickness, cut them into straight-edge strips, and then glue them together to form a single, laminated panel. This approach, known as a glue-up, would allow me to take many small, unusable pieces and create one large, strong, and beautiful board. It was a way to honor each piece of scrap, giving it a place in a new whole that was greater than the sum of its parts. The design was dictated entirely by what I had. The final width of the board would be determined by how many strips I could get, and its length by the shortest usable piece in the pattern. This method of working feels more like a collaboration than a command. You are in a constant dialogue with the wood. You make a cut, and the wood reveals a new pattern. You arrange the strips, and they suggest a new order. It's a dance. You lead for a step, then the wood leads for a step. This responsive way of creating is incredibly rewarding. It keeps you on your toes, and forces you to be resourceful. Instead of imposing a rigid idea, you are discovering the potential that was hidden in the pile all along. The vision was now clear, a beautiful striped board born from chaos. The first step in turning chaos into order is often the loudest. I took each rough piece of scrap to the joiner and planer. The goal was to create flat faces and square edges. This is a crucial and often overlooked part of the process. Without perfectly flat and square surfaces, the pieces will never join together cleanly. The air filled with the smell of freshly cut cherry and walnut as the machines shaved off the rough, weathered exteriors, revealing the vibrant wood beneath. One by one, the misshapen chunks were transformed into clean, uniform blocks. They were no longer scraps. They were now building materials. With the pieces milled to the same thickness, I moved to the table saw. This is where the artistry of the arrangement truly begins. I cut the blocks into strips of varying widths, paying close attention to the grain and color. I wanted a pattern that felt balanced, but not perfectly symmetrical, something that looked organic and intentional at the same time. I laid the strips out on my workbench, swapping them around, flipping them over, until the composition felt just right. The dark, rich walnut provided a bold anchor, while the lighter maple and cherry strips created rhythm and flow. This was the moment the collection of individual pieces started to look like a single, cohesive design. The glue-up is a moment of truth. It's a slightly frantic and sticky process, where you have a limited amount of time before the wood glue starts to set. I carefully applied an even layer of glue to the edge of each strip and brought them together, one by one. Then came the clamps. Lots of clamps. The purpose of the clamps is to apply firm, even pressure along the entire length of the board, squeezing the joints together tightly and ensuring a strong, seamless bond. A good glue joint, when done correctly, is actually stronger than the wood itself. I tightened the clamps, wiped away the excess glue that squeezed out, and then stepped back. The pile of scraps was now one solid panel. All I could do now was wait. The glue needed at least a few hours to cure properly, but I always prefer to leave it overnight. This is a forced pause in the process, a time for patience. The board sat there in its metal embrace, a strange spiky caterpillar in a chrysalis of clamps. It was still rough, with dried glue and slight misalignments between the strips, but the form was there. The promise of the final product was visible for the first time. The transformation from a pile of disconnected pieces into a single entity was complete. The next day, the real refinement would begin. After a long night in the clamps, I released the board. It was a solid, heavy panel of wood, but, honestly, it was far from beautiful. The surface was uneven, marked by dried glue and the slight differences in the strips. This is the critical turning point. Right now, this object could easily end up looking like a clumsy, amateur project from a high school woodshop class. It has potential, but the value is not yet realized. The difference between a cheap-looking cutting board and a premium, high-value piece of functional art comes down to the next few steps. It's all in the details, the refinement, and the finish. The first order of business was to flatten the surface and bring it to a final, perfect smoothness. This began with a pass through a drum sander to level out any high spots, followed by a long and meditative process of hand sanding. I started with a coarse, 80 grit sandpaper to remove the machine marks, and then worked my way progressively through finer and finer grits, 120, 180, 220, and finally, a silky 320 grit. Each successive grit erases the scratches of the one before it, polishing the wood to a state of incredible smoothness. This is not a fast process. It is a slow, deliberate act of care that you can feel with your fingertips. With the surfaces perfected, I turned my attention to the edges. A sharp 90-degree edge can feel harsh and unfinished. To elevate the piece, I used a router to create a subtle chamfer, a small 45-degree bevel around the top and bottom edges. This tiny detail makes a world of difference. It softens the profile of the board, makes it more comfortable to pick up, and catches the light in a pleasing way. It's a signal of thoughtful design. I also decided to carve a handle into one end, a simple, ergonomic cutout that adds functionality and a touch of elegance. These small choices are what separate mass-produced items from handcrafted treasures. The final step in the transformation is applying the finish. For a cutting board, you need something that is food-safe and will bring out the natural beauty of the wood. I chose a simple mixture of mineral oil and beeswax. As I wiped the first coat of oil onto the sanded wood, the magic happened. The colors, which had looked somewhat muted, suddenly became deep and vibrant. The rich brown of the walnut, the creamy white of the maple, and the warm red of the cherry burst forth. The grain patterns, which were barely visible before, now swirled with depth and character. This was the moment the board truly came to life, transformed from raw wood into a stunning object. The board sat on my workbench, gleaming under the shop lights. It felt solid, smooth, and substantial in my hands. The journey from a $5 pile of junk was complete. Looking at it now, it was hard to believe its humble origins. The careful arrangement of the woods, the seamless joints, the silky finish. It looked like an expensive item from a high-end kitchen store. But the question that always hangs in the air at the end of a project is a simple one. Is it just me? Do I love it just because I made it, or does it have real objective value to someone else? I believe that the value of an object is not just in its materials, but in the skill, care, and time invested in it. This board represented hours of work, planning, cutting, gluing, shaping, and sanding. It was a testament to the idea that craftsmanship itself is a valuable ingredient. I looked at the finished piece and thought about what it might be worth. The materials cost me $5. But the labor, the design, and the final quality were worth much more. I decided to put a price on it that reflected the work. I set the price at $150. Some might call that ambitious, but I felt it was fair for a one-of-a-kind, handcrafted piece. To test my theory, I decided to list it for sale. I took some clean, well-lit photographs of the board, making sure to capture the beautiful grain, the smooth finish, and the elegant handle. I wrote a simple description, telling the story of how it was made from a pile of reclaimed scrap wood. I didn't hide its origins. I celebrated them. The story of transformation was part of its value. I posted it on a local online marketplace, feeling a mix of pride and nervousness. Would anyone see the same value in it that I did? Or would it just sit there, a testament to my own inflated sense of worth? The waiting began. A day passed. Then, another. I started to wonder if I had aimed too high. Maybe it was, after all, just a fancy piece of scrap wood. Then, on the third day, an email notification popped up. Is your cutting board still available? My heart beat a little faster. The person came by that evening to see it. They picked it up, ran their hand over the smooth surface, and admired the contrast of the woods. They didn't haggle. They didn't question the price. They simply said, "It's beautiful. I'll take it." The exchange was made, and just like that, the $5 pile of scrap wood had officially become a $150 treasure. The excitement of that sale wasn't just about the money, it was about the validation. It was proof of a principle that I hold dear in the woodshop and in life, that value is not inherent in the raw material, but is created through vision, skill, and dedicated effort. We transformed something that was destined for the burn pile into an object of beauty and function that someone was happy to pay good money for. That transaction wasn't just a sale, it was the completion of the story. The wood scraps were saved, given a new purpose, and were now going to be used and appreciated in someone's home. This project serves as a powerful reminder for anyone who likes to make things. Don't be discouraged if you can't afford the most expensive materials. The most exotic figured slab of wood in the world is worthless if it's paired with poor craftsmanship. Conversely, the humblest materials can be elevated to extraordinary heights with a thoughtful design and a careful hand. Creativity is not about having the best stuff, it's about making the best of what you have. Look for the potential in the discarded, the forgotten, and the overlooked. The most rewarding projects often come from the most unlikely of places. The board itself is a physical representation of this idea. Each strip of wood in that board is worthless on its own. It's too small, too insignificant to be of any use. But when they are joined together with care, arranged with an eye for beauty, and finished with patience, they become something strong, useful, and valuable. It's a fine metaphor for many things, I suppose. It teaches you to look past the surface and see the hidden potential within. It's a lesson in patience, in transformation, and in the quiet power of craftsmanship to create something wonderful from next to nothing. So the next time you see a pile of offcuts, a discarded piece of furniture on the curb, or any material that seems past its prime, I hope you'll pause for a moment. I hope you'll think about this $5 board and the journey it took. The ability to transform is one of the most powerful skills we have. It's what turns wood into furniture, flour into bread, and ideas into reality. The journey of this board is over, but the workshop is ready for its next challenge. So I put the question to you, what should we transform next? Leave your ideas in the comments. I'm ready to get to work.